If you are an immigrant parent, you're going to need to adjust the way you parent if you are raising your children in Western European societies. And I say this because I just finished watching this documentary called What Jennifer Did on Netflix. And essentially, there's a young Vietnamese girl whose parents have very high expectations for her, and she's not meeting any of those expectations. It ends in tragedy. I could understand how an immigrant family would be struggling with raising a child in a Western European society, where the Western European society is telling children that you have autonomy. You basically don't have to listen to your parents, and your parents have no rights to tell you what to do, essentially. And here you have many immigrant families who come to this country with a high degree of expectation for their children and are disappointed when their children don't meet those expectations. And I think it's important for, if you're from an immigrant family, to adapt your style of parenting to suit the environment that you're in. I know, you've got various cultures that will enforce certain types of expected behaviors on children, and especially with girls, right? Girls are supposed to uphold the family honor in a lot of families. So when a girl decides that she's going to do something that is not in keeping with the expectations of the culture, you end up with, some very unhappy situations, sometimes deadly. So I guess I say all this to say that when I think about my own upbringing, I was raised in the 80s by African parents, and they had very high expectations of me, and they really struggled to understand why I didn't want to follow a path that they had set out for me. And we are now very good friends, right? I have a very good relationship with my parents, but at the time, we didn't get on. But it's only now, as an adult, that I understand what they were trying to do for me, why they were behaving the way that they were behaving. But I think I wouldn't repeat some of those mistakes with my own children. I wouldn't expect my children to go into a particular career path. I will lay all the foundations out for them, but I will not force my expectations onto them. I will give them all the tools that they need to make the right decisions for themselves. And I think that's really important generally as a parent. There's an element of gentleness that you need to have with your children, which I think a lot of African parents don't have. And yeah, if I think back to my relationship with my mum and dad, there was a lack of gentleness, I guess, in the way that they dealt with me. And sometimes, my parents would try and talk to me to understand what was going on with me at 15 years old and why I was not listening to them or why I was not trying in school. And there were various reasons, right? I was raised in anyway, I don't really want to go into it, but there were various reasons. I was very unhappy in school, and it made me just not want to try, and I didn't want to be there. But my parents didn't understand that, right? And they tried their best. And sometimes they would try to have that conversation with me, but because all they did was shout at me 90% of the time, when they did try the gentle approach, I didn't want to tell them anything, because at that point my trust had been broken in them, and I didn't want to tell them how I was feeling. So I would just say, if you're from an immigrant family, stop shouting at your kids. Create a safe environment in which they can tell you anything. Create environments where it's okay for them not to meet all the expectations that you have set upon them. They will find their way. I found my way, I'm relatively okay now. I mean, could I have had a better career? Who knows? I earn a good income despite all of the teenage angst that I went through. And it's a natural thing for teenagers to go through, to be very anxious, to struggle with their identity, to struggle to make sense of the world. And as parents, your job is to be there to try and help them navigate all those emotions that are going through them. It's not to be shouting at them all the time. And keep in mind that children, the brain doesn't actually become fully formed until you're well into your, I would say well into 25 plus. And so your teenagers slash, 20 something year olds will continue to make bad decisions. But all you can do as a parent is just to give them the information and the tools to be able to make the right decisions. And if it doesn't work, you've done your best. But it doesn't have to end in a situation where you are causing friction by not trying to understand your children. And I know it's easier said than done when you've come with a fixed mindset from your home country where, your father hit you and shouted at you, and then your father's father hit and shouted, and that was just the natural order of being. And I understand that when you come to this country and you're stressed out, you haven't got your family around you. It's a real struggle. The immigrant story is a real struggle. And then you add teenage children who don't listen to you, who don't put out the meat when you ask them to, who don't wash the rice when you ask them to, and you come home and you're exhausted and the house is a mess. I understand the natural need to shout. Now, I recognize that I haven't got teenage children. I'm just saying that I understand why parents used to come home and shout at their kids for not doing like the routine and mundane things. But as parents, we really have to get our own sort of therapy in order to cope with that. And I know African parents, the idea of therapy is like, Jesus is my therapist, right? Whatever you need to do to help your children, you have to do it. But you cannot come to this country with your attitude from back home where it's like, you listen to me or you get out of my house kind of attitude, because children really need you to help them to navigate those emotions. And I know a lot of immigrant parents don't come with the ability and the equipment to be able to do that, the knowledge and the equipment that would allow them to be able to do that for their children. But as a parent, it's incumbent upon you to try and learn how to help your children. And I guess, yeah. Anyway, let me know in the comments how your experience was as a child of immigrants. What would you say to your parents to help them if you were to look back and reflect? Yeah, just let me know. See ya.